my whole thing is words really matter. And so if you think about it from a marketing standpoint, if you call it digital contact tracking, all of a sudden people are much more open to it, right? That they're, hey, we need
It's a
that. That's going to
euphemism. It
stop the
sounds
virus.
great. Yeah.
If I said to you, we're going to surveil the population, and then we're going to label who is positive and who is not, all of a sudden that sounds a lot more scary, a lot more worrisome, right? And so the language, there's a joke that I always go back to, and I got to go back and figure out who it was. If it was Chris Rock or who the comedian was, but they're saying something to the effect of the greatest marketing campaign in the world was the use of the word insurgent. So we went into Iraq and Afghanistan. We said, hey, we're taking on the insurgents. We're going to go kill the insurgents. And everyone in the United States looked around and said, well, I'm not an insurgent. You're not an insurgent. I don't know any insurgents. Go kill them all. Kill all the insurgents. But if instead we had said, hey, we're going to go kill people who are pissed off that we invaded their country, or we're going to go kill humans, people say, whoa, time out. I don't want us to kill the humans. I thought we were just going to kill the insurgents. Right? It's got a different kind of connotation to it when you change the language. And so I think that this is another example where digital contact tracking sounds very scientific. It sounds very kind of health oriented. It sounds like it's something that we as a society have to do to stop the virus, right? This invisible enemy. How do we do it? We agree to digital contact tracking. But the second that you say, no, we're going to surveil the society and we're going to label people, it's a whole different.
Yeah. So just when you hear digital contact tracing, just think in your mind, citizen surveillance. And I was even surprised to see Snowden and the ACLU come out and say, basically, hey, we're watching this carefully, but maybe it could be good. I mean, it can only be bad. I mean, let me explain the slippery slope. If we become more comfortable and if this normalization of mass surveillance is made possible through this crisis, if the governments take this crisis and see an opportunity and say, hey, here's an opportunity for us to make mass surveillance more palatable, more reasonable. It can again, the science of marketing, we can make it sound slick and call it digital contact tracing. Where does it end? And I'll tell you where it ends. It ends with something called color coding, citizen color coding. So in China, in Hubei province and elsewhere, now that they're quote unquote coming out of lockdown, which, in and of itself is arguable. And I think a lot of it is a Potemkin village, based on what I know. But let's just assume that, okay, so China is regardless of whether the virus has been beaten back or not, they are allowing people to start to leave their homes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in order to leave your home, go to work, get on public transportation, your phone needs to display a certain color, green, yellow, or red. And if you're red, you can't go anywhere. So you need to be green. So who decides what is green and what is yellow? There was a video I watched, which was quite informative, from a British guy who's living there now. And, he's yellow and he's sitting in a room with this woman who's Chinese and she's green, and they're not wearing masks and they're just within 5 feet of each other talking. And, her color is not going to yellow. So I don't know how it works, but it's clearly probably a little more propaganda than actual science. The point is that you are going to be color coded based on how the government perceives you as a threat to the operation of society. So it's not it's not like the app is capable of actually understanding if you're, infected or not, or have a particular issue or not. Some human tells the app, what you're doing, and it gives you a score. So this builds into what I think touched on the last show about how over the last decade, the Chinese government has been building this idea of a citizen score, which is kind of like a credit score, but it also adds behavior, your friends, things like that, into your basically reliability score. And for them, it's more like a patriotism score. And your patriotism score dictates, what kind of loan you can get, where you can travel, what kind of schools your kids can get into, et cetera. So on top of that infrastructure, which is built out, at the municipal level, it's built out at the corporate level. There's a lot of different experiments all around China. Each region has a kind of different one. They're now adding this color coding to the mix. So now they're basically able to control your movements in China based on what color you have. And there's a old Soviet joke that HRF's chairman Gary Kasparov likes to say, that nothing is more permanent than a temporary measure. And, that could not ring more true right now. It's not like the color coding is going away. And even in the West, even in our countries, it's not like the Google, Apple, Bluetooth digital contact tracing is going away. It's not like they're going to, in 6 months, delete it off your phone. No, they're going to find a new reason for it. The FBI is going to look at it and be like, hey, this is actually really useful for this other thing that we need. Or some other company is going to say, hey, this would be way easier for us to understand the marketing behavior of our customers. We want to keep it. That's coming to stay. Every time we add one of these new innovations in citizen surveillance and behavior tracking, it doesn't go away. It stays. That's one thing that we have learned. And you have to think about this idea that we are on the slippery slope to color coding, and it's going to get more inescapable because our devices, as we've all seen in the last 2 decades, are shrinking. I mean, the things that we use to communicate with each other and rely on are going from computers that sit on our desks and we have to go to phones that go in our pocket, to wearables that we wear on our wrist, to eventually a chip, dude, that's going to be either in your wrist or your retina or whatever. Sure, that's going to happen in the next 20, 30 years. Absolutely. And you have to think about this evolution of your digital identity and how it's going to kind of go from kind of over the skin surveillance to under the skin surveillance, which is a concept that Yuval Noah Harari, the historian, talks about. But I think this all ends in something that I want to call privacy shaming. I think that's what's going to happen as we get further down the road, and you're starting to see it now. I'm getting shamed on Twitter, for example, for basically sounding the alarm on the digital contact tracing thing and trying to challenge people on the Apple and Google project. People are calling me a religious fundamentalist, a privacy absolutist, whatever. I'm getting shamed. And I think down the road, especially with the young generation, I think what you're going to see is it's going to be cool to have these wearables, chips, whatever, new devices, and people who are caring about privacy and rights and freedoms will maybe be uncool. And I think that's going to happen in the future. And we're very worried about that. And it's something that kind of keeps me up at night. And we can stop it by creating an alternative narrative that privacy is cool, that it's actually cool to have rights and freedoms, and it is essential to the backbone of our society and the country we've built here in the USA. It's actually cool to protect your livelihood and the information about yourself. And that's a narrative that I would want to do my best to help build.